Before we begin, I just want to thank you for being here with me today. If you enjoy stories like this, please take a moment to subscribe, share this video, and support the channel. Your support truly means a lot to me, and it helps me keep bringing more stories like this to you. Now, let's step into today's story. At Helion Spindle, a diplomatic station hanging above the gas giant Meridian, Ariana Vale stood in the east intake corridor and watched the final security sweep cross the polished floor. Helion Spindle was the kind of place where the galaxy congratulated itself. Treaties were praised there, trade routes were blessed there, and difficult power plays were often hidden inside graceful public language. Today, that mattered because Ariana had not come for a routine ceremony. She had come for a live transfer tied to the Aegis Ring. And if anything in that transfer changed without Earth's approval, the cost would not stay symbolic for long. She was 38, born in the Atlantic Arcology, and known across Earth shipping and rescue networks as a strategic infrastructure engineer who solved large problems. Publicly, she was here to be honored for her work on the Aegis Ring, a defensive network built to protect civilian trade corridors from piracy, raid swarms, and state-backed seizures. But before she left Earth, the Ministry of Transit and External Systems had given her one clear instruction. Make sure the final live handshake of Earth's repair protocols stayed inside committee scope. No silent edits. No expanded permissions. No permanent transfer. If she failed, Earth could lose control over the part of the ring that made it more than expensive hardware. It would lose leverage, and in the Galactic Council, leverage was often the last polite word before submission. Inside, tiered galleries curve around a central platform. Delegations from nearly 100 member civilizations had already taken their places. Some had come to celebrate stability. Others had come to measure who would control it. Most, Ariana suspected, had come to see whether Earth understood what it had helped build. You look like someone attending a funeral instead of an award. Ariana turned. Director Sun Arc stood with his hands clasped behind his back, silver hair neat, face unreadable. He led the Earth mission at Council and had spent years learning how to sound warm without giving anything away. I have attended. Enough awards to know they sometimes begin after the smiling, Ariana said. A faint corner of his mouth moved. Then let us hope today is still one of the easy ones. Is it? He took a second too long to answer. Today is one of the visible ones. That is rarely the same thing. Through the hall entrance, Ariana could see the suspended model of the Aegis Ring rotating above the central dais. Audience screens wrapped it in the usual language of triumph. Shared security, common future, mutual stability. What troubled her was one dim line inside the rotating model, a narrow band that pulsed once every 12 seconds along a section she knew by heart. It was subtle enough to look decorative to everyone else. To Ariana, it looked like a control layer. Sun Arc noticed immediately. What is it? The simulation is carrying a control band that should not be there. Are you sure? I wrote half the visual logic for the demonstration package. That band is not decorative. It has a job. He looked into the hall, then back to her. Can it wait until after the ceremony? He lowered his voice. In the next half hour, Earth needs grace more than friction. And if that line means what I think it means, grace is exactly what they expect from us while they move the floor. She kept watching the model. Then the pattern clarified. A pulse through the inner routing spine. A lock overlay. Then a brief flicker at the outbound transit gates that serviced the soul lanes. Someone had inserted a region gate. Someone had given the Aegis Ring away to close around Earth. By the time the first round of acknowledgments ended, Ariana had already asked for 3 technical clarifications and been denied all 3 with immaculate politeness. The council presentation team claimed the display package was running on a ceremonial mirror, not the live architecture. Security stewards refused floor-level diagnostics during an active event. A junior liaison smiled too quickly and called the control band a harmless visual abstraction. When the chamber shifted into intermission, Ariana moved out of the ceremonial lane and crossed toward a side console cluster reserved for presentation engineers. The operators moved with the evasive rhythm of people who had been warned about her in advance. One of them, a narrow-faced Varen technician with bronze skin and dark, gill marks along the jaw, tried to block her view of the diagnostic stream. "I only need the route flag table," Ariana said. "The route table is sealed." "Then tell me who sealed it." Ariana folded her arms. "I am the Earth System's signatory for the adaptive maintenance layer. If a live route control was added after committee lock, that is not ceremonial. That is a governance breach." She leaned in. "You do not have to give me classified content. Just answer one clean question. Did Earth sign that layer?" The technician swallowed. "No recorded Earth signature appears in the public approval stack." She took out her slate and tried to open the mirrored demonstration package with local forensic access. Denied. She tried again with Earth engineering credentials. Denied again. The console displayed a line that read, "Access path unavailable during event integrity conditions." "What do you see?" Ariana asked. Cushion physiology gave Rian Tao a stillness humans often mistook for passivity, but Ariana had known him during the prototype years on the Hadron Yard lines. He was one of the few non-human designers who could watch a complex failure tree unfold and tell, from the silence around it, which part had been ordered. His slate remained dark at his side, which meant he did not trust the room. An inner gate map keyed to origin identity. Earth. Rian angled his body so passing attendants could not read his lips. A maintenance relay in the outer arm received a precinct packet 2 hours ago. It referenced a conditional region state. I asked for review access and was informed my authorization had expired this morning. Ariana looked back toward the suspended model. Another pulse ran through the soul lanes. Who is carrying the insertion? Rian did not answer at once. He did not need to. She knew the name. Everyone did. The Civic Balance Coalition branded itself as the patient center of council governance, too civilized for conquest and too rational for panic. They chaired de-escalation committees, wrote corridor ethics standards, and spoke with sincere concern whenever a newer civilization disrupted old equilibrium. Rian finally looked toward the upper balcony where a cluster of pale robes sat beneath the council crest. Mandate is often a question of timing. Can you give me proof? Not from here, but there is a maintenance lattice beneath the west circulation spine. A ceremonial hall has to breathe through somewhere. Before Ariana could answer, High Convener Malin Sorth approached. He was not imposing in the usual way. No military bearing. No ciatrique robes. The species of Leth tended toward long frames and restrained movements, and Malin had built a career on looking like the only adult left in every crisis. His face carried the expression that one votes in unstable times, patient concern, quiet disappointment, a willingness to do what harder people had forced upon history. Engineer Vale. I hope Helion Spindle has treated you with the respect your work deserves. Ariana met his eyes. Respect is easier to measure when it comes with transparent documentation. A busy day invites procedural roughness. I trust we can correct any small inconveniences after the session. Is a regional origin lock on the soul lanes a small inconvenience? Malin did not flinch. This may not be the best setting for speculative language. It is precise language. Malin's eyes rested on her with patient sadness. Earth has made exceptional contributions to the common peace. No serious person questions that. But mature systems must account for unpredictable growth points. That is not punishment. It is prudence. Prudence for whom? Ariana asked. For everyone who depends on stability more than vanity. He gestured lightly toward the hall. Please join us, Engineer Vale. We are about to celebrate what humanity has made possible. The public ceremony rolled on. Ariana accepted the medallion because refusing it would have given the room a dramatic shape it had not earned. She spoke her allotted 4 minutes because Earth still needed its face intact. She thanked the relay builders, dock teams, patch crews, insurance analysts, rescue planners, and the many civilizations whose work had made the ring possible. She described security as a shared habit, not a shared weapon, and said peace was less a wall than a promise to repair what panic broke. When she stepped down, Director Sun Arc was waiting. He gestured toward a private alcove screened by light glass. Walk with me. Once inside, He activated a local privacy haze and let his diplomatic smile fall away. Do you have proof? Not complete proof. Enough pattern to stop treating this like paranoia. Sunark shut off his slate entirely. Listen carefully. We are in a narrow position. Trade votes begin next month. The mining corridor disputes with the Trend Combine are not settled. Earth does not benefit from a public fracture with the Civic Balance Coalition today. Then perhaps the coalition should have thought of that before inserting a cage around the soul lanes. I know what happens when a newer power mistakes suspicion for leverage inside this building. If there's been an overreach, we address it through channels. Ariana stepped closer. What consequences would you like me to picture? Earth being embarrassed for one news cycle? Or Earth waking up behind a border system that can classify our own traffic as a stability threat? He held her eyes. You think I do not understand the risk? I understand it well enough to know panic is their best ally. For a moment, she thought he would end the conversation. Instead, he said quietly, you need to stop pulling at this in public. Give me the data you have. I will take it into the delegation channel. No, if I hand this to the mission now, it disappears in a timetable language, and by tomorrow the isolation trigger becomes a procedural footnote no one can unwind without paying for it in blood or humiliation. He took a step back. You are close to becoming a problem the Council can classify, and once they do, every argument you make becomes easier to dismiss. Then I need proof they cannot dismiss. He almost laughed. It came out tired instead. Go nowhere near the upper system vaults. Security will be waiting for that. If you must be reckless, at least be original. She gave him a narrow look. Was that advice? It was the most I can say and still pretend I'm not speaking. West circulation spine. 8 minutes. Bring no official device. Ariana slipped the medallion into her bag without looking at it and turned toward the maintenance access routes. The honor had already served its purpose. Now the real work could begin. The maintenance lattice beneath the west circulation spine looked exactly like what grand political architecture spent its life hiding. The upper halls of Helion Spindle were all symmetry, glass, and controlled light. Down here, behind a plane service panel and 3 steep flights of stairs, the station remembered that prestige still depended on vents, coolant lines, emergency relays, and people willing to crawl under polished systems when polished systems lied. Rian waited beside a junction tower where 4 cable bundles disappeared into the station floor. He had stripped the formal mantle from his shoulders and folded it with careful irritation across a pipe rail. I always find diplomacy more tolerable once the decorative layers come off. Ariana handed him the clean slate she had brought. You said there was a maintenance packet. There was. More interestingly, there was an authorization route. He patched her slate into a local spool and brought up a narrow chain of node entries. Most of the packets were what she expected. Latency balancing, thermal compensation, route pressure smoothing. Then she saw the hidden branch. Containment horizon. The packet did not only define a regional isolation option keyed to Earth origin vectors. It also established thresholds under which the Aegis Ring could reclassify Sol-adjacent traffic as a managed instability source. The trigger conditions were dressed in harmless language. Civil mobilization anomalies. Strategic variance. Cascade risk. Collective response unpredictability. If the Council wanted, it could close the major protective routes around Earth while claiming it was preserving wider peace. Rian touched the top line. The Security Harmonization Secretariat initiated. Civic Balance Coalition endorsed. Final live routing depended on advisory concurrence from transit stakeholders. Ariana followed the path deeper. A cluster of review notes had been redacted, but one surviving line remained in the metadata. Adaptive self-repair dependency acceptable during transition phase. They know the ring still depends on us. Rian tilted his head. Perhaps they think dependency can be cured. During the prototype years, Earth had not simply written rules for automated recovery. It had taught the adaptive layer by feeding it real human decisions from convoy crashes, hull breaches, relay fires, debris floods, and civilian rescues. Tens of thousands of choices made under stress. Improvised reroutes. Triage calls corrected on the fly by technicians who knew models broke the moment frightened people entered them. They think they are installing a lock, Ariana said. What they are really doing is trying to separate the ring from the kind of judgment that keeps it alive when conditions turn messy. Rian opened another stream. This one showed patch timing from several outer maintenance relays. The delay curves were subtle but real. They have already started throttling the Earth-side adaptive refreshes in some test sectors. Very lightly, enough to see whether the ring compensates. The meaning was simple. They were reducing fresh human updates in a few places to see whether the ring could keep functioning without them. The system was holding, but it was holding in the brittle way of a body masking pain to get through a ceremony. Too much compensation. Too many local saves. Too little graceful recovery. They are stress testing a separation. Rian gave a humorless flick of his hand. Then the report will say local variance exceeded expectation and further refinement is required. He turned back to the slate. There is more. A subfolder opened. Inside were transit waiting tables for emergency logistics. These waits change priority to sole outbound support under managed instability. Yes, they lower resource preference to Earth peripheral colonies. Yes, they never intended to lock only Earth proper. They intended to isolate the full human network while preserving the fiction that humanitarian routes remain open. This was no longer a sovereignty insult. It was infrastructure control over scattered human populations who would never appear on council podiums and would not know why medicine shipments slowed, repair windows slipped, or insurance rates suddenly treated them like risk instead of citizens. What can you move without tripping station alarms? She asked. Logs. Not full stacks. If I pull too much, they will know. Then move enough to show intent, enough to show dependency, and enough to show the colony waits. When Rian finished, he transferred packet fragments to a dead storage shard no larger than a fingernail. This buys you an argument, not a victory. I only need an argument that forces the right room to stop lying. He hesitated. If the Civic Balance Coalition is driving this, then they believe the long-term risk of a fully integrated Earth is greater than the short-term cost of cheating you. That makes them patient, Ariana said. Patient people will let you speak if they think the room has already been prepared against you. She slid the shard into the seam of her wrist cuff. Then she looked toward the ceiling, toward the polished chambers above them, and thought of all the people across Earth and its colonies who would never hear the phrase containment horizon. They would never know how close their lives might come to being managed by soft language in a room this far away. If they meant to hide a border inside a celebration, she would drag the border into the light. When Ariana left the maintenance lattice, she did not head back into the ceremony. She moved instead toward a quieter political room, because now she needed to hear Malin without the protection of a public stage. The first direct confrontation with Malin Soreth happened in a side council room with a view of Meriden below. The quiet annex projected the gas giant's cloud bands in muted gold. It was the kind of room chosen for difficult conversations by people who believed good furniture and a planet view could make coercion feel thoughtful. Ariana arrived because she had been invited in the way powerful institutions invited people they had already classified. A polite request from a steward, a private audience, a chance to resolve misunderstanding. Malin stood beside the window when she entered, alone except for one recording orb dimmed to private retention mode. Engineer Vale. Thank you for coming. I would prefer we not dramatize scheduling. He gestured toward a low table with tea service. Ariana remained standing. Malin accepted the refusal without comment. I've been told you are asking procedural questions beyond your event role. I was not aware event roles overruled system integrity. They do not. But context matters. Then give me context for an unapproved origin lock tied to Earth routing. He looked at her for a moment and then set courtesy aside. The galaxy has entered a period of accelerated instability. Supply patterns are shifting. Younger civilizations are scaling more quickly. Military doctrines are adapting to civilian infrastructure in ways our older frameworks did not anticipate. None of that authorizes a hidden regional isolation mechanism. Authorization is a narrower concept than responsibility. He continued, "You are an engineer, so I will speak plainly. Earth changes systems faster than systems can become comfortable with being changed. That is sometimes admirable, is also dangerous." She let the word hang. Dangerous is a pretty word. I'm not your enemy. The Civic Balance Coalition has spent 15 years preventing corridor wars, counter-sanction spirals, and retaliatory trade blockades. We study destabilization because we have learned what ungoverned acceleration looks like. And in your study, Earth became a variable too lively to leave unboxed. A civilization that repeatedly improvises around formal constraints will always alarm systems built on predictability. Ariana took one step closer. Improvises around constraints. Do you mean rescue convoys that ignored deadlocks while your committees debated corridor liability? Emergency hull chains built by civilian crews when sanctioned. Fleets refused to share tow capacity? Patch teams that rewrote relay behavior in the field because older powers were still voting on definitions while people suffocated in transit queues. Yes, I mean those. Your species is very good at acting first and defending theory later. That makes you useful in crisis. It also makes you profoundly difficult to embed inside systems that must survive your crises. She understood then why the coalition had chosen this path. Not because they hated humanity, because they feared what humanity did to static arrangements. Earth had become too valuable, too adaptive, too hard to predict. You could have brought the concern into committee. Malin gave her the language cleanly. Buffer corridors, transitional safeguards, manage sovereignty interfaces. That is what you call a cage when you want the room to clap. For the first time, his patience sharpened. No, that is what we call restraint when the alternative is waiting until the system breaks under a force no one has bothered to map honestly. Earth is not a force of nature. No, it is harder than that. It is a civilization that learns from stress faster than existing hierarchies can metabolize. You do not merely join systems. You alter them. And your answer is to wall us in. My answer is to buy the galaxy time before integration becomes irreversible. Ariana looked at Meriden's cloud bands below and imagined human outposts, freight crews, colony medics, route pilots, and maintenance workers reduced to a problem of pacing in a room like this. If you lock Earth behind a ring, you are not buying time. You are teaching every human network beyond Sol that their future can be negotiated without them. Malin's tone softened again. We are trying to ensure there is a future to negotiate at all. He thought he was the responsible one, the adult in the room, the one holding off chaos while younger powers mistook momentum for destiny. She reached into her bag, took out the award medallion, and set it on the tea table between them. You should keep this nearby. It will save time later. You can reuse it when you honor Earth for maintaining the border that keeps Earth obedient. His gaze dropped to the metal disc, then returned to her face. I would advise against escalating this through theater. I would advise against building your ethics into our infrastructure. Without asking, Malin spoke one last time before she reached the door. If you force this into daylight before you understand the full architecture, you may damage the only coalition still willing to argue that Earth belongs inside the common future. If belonging requires asking permission to remain human, then perhaps your common future is smaller than you think. She had her answer now. Not every detail, not every signature, but the center was clear. The people trying to close the ring around Earth were not monsters. They were custodians, and custodians who believed history had made them necessary were often the most dangerous people in any system. When Ariana left the annex, she went straight to the communications gallery. If Earth could no longer hear her clearly, then every next move would become harder. Her first message burst to Earth failed. The third returned with a bland note stating priority reassignment during ceremonial security conditions. She stood in a narrow communications gallery above the Western logistics arm until it became undeniable. This was not simple monitoring. This was delay. Rian arrived carrying 2 cups of station coffee. You look like you were deciding which bridge to burn. Ariana took 1 cup. All I have so far is proof that the bridge schedule has already changed. He studied the traces without surprise. They were always going to monitor sensitive channels. This is more than monitoring. They are introducing lag on outbound Earth priority packets. It is expected. The Council believes delay is kinder than denial. Her slate flashed with a secure mission request. Director Sun arced. Ariana, where are you? In a place where your messages still arrive eventually. The Security Harmonization Secretariat is asking whether Earth wishes to revise its representation for the implementation session tomorrow. She went still. They want me removed. They want someone less technically central and more diplomatically manageable. So, the mission agrees. I intend to keep Earth in the room, he said, by preventing you from becoming the story before the substance is secure. She closed her eyes for one beat. Is the mission standing with me or standing around me? His voice sounded older than before. That depends on whether you are still collecting evidence or preparing an uprising. I am preparing not to wake up behind a border we did not approve. Then hear this carefully. There was a memorandum. A what? A draft framework circulated 3 months ago. It used the phrase regional buffering. It implied temporary routing controls in the event of systemic acceleration. Ariana felt the trap sharpen. And Earth signed. No, Earth acknowledged exploratory review. There is a difference. There is also a difference between reading poison and drinking it. Some believed it was an exaggerated contingency that would narrow under implementation. Some believed refusing too early would isolate Earth, while rivals wrote the security architecture without it. Some believed agreeing to talk was safer than being cast as the reckless younger power that feared scrutiny. Sen art spoke quietly. I believed language could still be constrained. She almost laughed. You believe words would save us from people using words as cover. I believe keeping a seat at the table mattered. It always matters, until the table has already been bolted to the floor. When he spoke again, the diplomat was gone. If Earth had refused everything on first contact, the coalition would have written us as proof of their case. Yes, Ariana said, which is why you need something I can defend in daylight. There was a short silence. Then Sun Arc said very quietly, there's a civic oversight chamber beneath the public assembly hall. It was built generations ago, so infrastructure hearings could be projected to delegates and press simultaneously when private security proceedings became politically dangerous. Ariana understood at once. He was not authorizing her. He was telling her where power became vulnerable to witnesses. You did not hear this from me, he said. The chamber key remains attached to the old transit review office. The office no longer exists. The maintenance registry still does. His audio clicked once. If you turn this into a public technical dispute and cannot carry the room, Earth will be cut open for it. If I do nothing, Earth may be cut out. Rian had heard enough. Your envoy just decided he would rather be plausible than clean. He decided the room is no longer safe enough for neat lies. Ariana pushed away from the wall. We need the inheritance chain. Rian dropped the empty cup into a recycler slot. There's a live simulation mirror tied to the Western maintenance shell. It updates every 90 seconds. If they're already running a separation test, it will show compensations building before the public model does. They left the gallery and moved back into the service corridors because the next proof would not be found in speeches. It would be buried where Helion Spindle kept the hardware it preferred not to mention. If she failed, the people who paid first would not be the people writing communiques. They would be distant human crews, colony medics, transport planners, and repair teams who lived where policy arrived as a slower ship, a higher premium, a thinner margin, or a closed route no one explained. The Western maintenance shell was a hollow crescent wrapped around one of Helion Spindle's old transit spines, a place where obsolete oversight hardware and still useful emergency relays had been layered over one another through a century of expansions. It smelled of machine oil and dry insulation. Ariana trusted it immediately. Rian led her to a diagnostic cradle still stamped with the faded seal of the old transit review office. Beside it, half hidden behind bundled cables, sat the access port Sun Arc had implied existed and hoped never to discuss again. You were right. The registry still thinks this office matters. Ariana slid into the cradle seat, locked her clean slate into the local rail, and brought up the Western simulation mirror. At first glance, it looked routine. Node health, corridor loads, thermal strain, patch histories. Then the deeper structure appeared. Thousands of adaptive callbacks, each one linked to a recovery event from the prototype years. Some from Earth shipyards, some from private rescue fleets, some from insurance drills, some from real disasters nobody outside freight and maintenance circles remembered anymore. Look here, Ariana said. A cluster of fresh throttles had appeared around 3 test sectors. The system was attempting to maintain function while withholding the latest human adaptive refreshes. Then the strain showed. The network was not collapsing. It was becoming less flexible. Ria nodded once. Because static doctrine is governable. Ariana kept reading. No, human response is governable only when crises stay neat. The ring was built for crises that refuse neatness. She opened the learning histories one by one and began pulling examples simple enough to survive public explanation. A ferry breach where the official model closed the wrong 2 gates because it assumed passengers would remain orderly, and human controllers opened a 3rd route that violated clean procedure and saved 600 lives. A relay fire where the model preserved strategic freight first, and human technicians overrode priority because the listed cargo values missed what the cargo was for. A collision cluster where the system predicted panic density in one dock and was wrong because a local union foreman used an old emergency phrase every crew on that station obeyed instinctively. If the council cut Earth out, the ring would still operate. For a while. Then she found the note. Regional buffering pre-activation. Observation cycle. Ariana read the attached line and felt anger rise so cleanly it sharpened her. They're going to run a live partial isolation test before the formal session. Yes. The note carried Malin's coalition endorsement and the Security Secretariat execution stamp. It framed the move as a harmless confidence demonstration for nervous delegates. Proof that the ring could preserve corridor stability even if one member civilization experienced strategic divergence. She built the next layer of her packet. Command request. Colony weighting changes. Adaptive inheritance examples. Throttle strain curves. Emergency branch naming. Enough for intent. Enough for consequence. Enough for ordinary listeners to understand that the people promising balance had chosen to test their theory on the lives of people who had not been asked. A security sweep flashed past the corridor beyond the half-open hatch. Local registry ping came from this shell. Old transit office ghost. Probably nothing. Rian reconnected the mirror after a full minute. We do not have much longer. We have enough. He looked at the evidence stack on her slate. Not enough to protect you. No, Ariana said. Only enough to make protecting themselves more expensive. She sealed the packet and split it into 3 dead storage copies. One in her wrist cuff. One into the lining of her satchel. One into Rian's sleeve compartment. If they take me, he asked, I know where the civic chamber is. Ariana slept for 43 minutes in a chair inside an unused records room and woke with a numb shoulder, a dry mouth, and the clear sense that the day had already started without asking whether she was ready. Helion Spindle was moving into session mode. Tight corridor control. Lower ambient noise. More cameras. Ria met her outside the records room with bad news delivered in a tone too flat to be dramatic. My station privileges have been suspended. For what reason? Technical overreach inconsistent with my advisory role. He held up a thin cuff of dark metal around one wrist. They were considerate enough to call it a movement safeguard. She stared at it. They put a control band on you. No, save your leverage. You are not leverage. Today, everything is leverage. What access do you still have? Peripheral observer feeds. No writing authority. No route controls. It will have to be enough. Ariana stopped at one screen where a simple graphic displayed the ring as a protective halo around the core trade worlds. Earth was visible only as a modest point inside the larger map. A protected participant, a beneficiary, not one of the living foundations. Her secure channel flashed again. Director Sun arced. This time video. He looked exhausted. I have 1 minute. Listen carefully. The Coalition is circulating a talking line that Earth technical contributors are overstating their unique role in order to preserve privileged maintenance rights. Ariana almost smiled from pure fatigue. So that is the shape. Yes. If you speak publicly, they will say you are confusing contribution with ownership. I am not claiming ownership. Then what are you claiming? Dependency. That stopped him for a beat. Then he nodded once. That is more dangerous. It is also true. There is worse, he said. The ministry side on Earth is splitting. Some want a formal protest. Some want delay. Some still think public escalation will hand the Coalition the moral center. Ariana kept her expression neutral. Do you? He took too long to answer. No, not anymore. Something in her eased a fraction. What changed? An appendix I was not supposed to see. Peripheral colony service downgrades under managed instability. No public notice requirement. I will need access to the public relay if the civic chamber feed gets challenged. I can open it once. For under 90 seconds. After that, the presiding staff will shut me out. 90 seconds is enough if the room is already turning. His voice dropped. If you do this, there is no clean retreat. You will either carry the room or be recast as the engineer who tried to destabilize the launch of the galaxy's most important security project. I understand. No, I do not think you do. If this fails, Earth may decide it never sent you. She held his gaze. Then I had better not fail. When the call ended, she stepped into a silent corridor lined with old oversight plaques. This level had once mattered greatly, and now mattered only when current systems grew embarrassed enough to need ancestors. At the end of the corridor, behind a recessed wall panel, she found the Transit Review Office Registry port exactly where Sun Arc had implied it would be. The lock accepted a maintenance code on the third try and opened into a small chamber smelling of dust and cold metal. This was where truth came when private procedure lost its legitimacy. She set her satchel down, opened her evidence stack, and began shaping the order of presentation again. Not too much. The listener had to know who was doing what, to whom, and why it mattered. First, define the ring in ordinary language. Then define what Earth contributed. Then show the hidden control. Then show the colony waiting. Then show the human inheritance. Then show the live strain if the test had already begun. A soft alarm blinked on the corner of the civic console. Observation cycle active. Ariana opened the feed. 3 outer sectors on the ring's western shoulder had shifted into regional buffering state. The visual looked calm enough to a casual eye. No explosions. No collapsing nodes. Just a rebalancing of traffic priorities and emergency support routing. But Ariana knew how to read what calm cost. Patch queue times were lengthening. Compensation loads were rising. 2 freight corridors had already rerouted medical priority to secondary lanes. A civilian carrier cluster was being held outside a safer dock pattern because the static doctrine preferred order over flexible congestion. It had begun. She checked the session clock. The hall would fill in 40 minutes. Her hand hovered over the chamber wait key. Then her private channel chirped once. Rian, voice only, very quiet. They came for me again. Not forcefully. Efficiently. Where are you? Lower advisory hold. I can still see a fraction of the western shell. Strain is building faster than they predicted. Can you send me the live lag sequence? I already did. A new file appeared on her console. Their confidence model assumed the human inheritance layer had become passive, Rian said. It has not. Once deprived of fresh human updates, it overcompensates and then narrows. Meaning the ring gets rigid. Yes, and in a real crisis, it will choose procedure over survival too often. Ariana let out one slow breath. There it was, the sentence the whole room needed. If they cut Earth out, the ring would begin choosing procedure over survival. She looked at the wait key again. Rian, yes, I am sorry. For what? For the price. His reply came after a beat. If systems are allowed to lie about what keeps them alive, the price is always paid by people who never enter the room. Better here. Ariana straightened, put both hands on the old civic console, and woke the chamber. The civic oversight chamber was awake again. By the time the implementation session opened, the room had already chosen its mood. Measured, responsible, forward-looking. Ariana recognized the tone from 1,000 lesser meetings across Earth and beyond. It was the sound systems made when they wanted change to arrive as inevitability rather than decision. No one inside the hall would say Earth was being contained. They would say the ring's governance model reflected a mature understanding of shared risk, and that every civilization accepted constraints in exchange for the common peace. Ariana entered through the lower civic stair instead of the delegate lanes, which meant people noticed her only after she was already moving along the chamber edge beneath the galleries. At the center dais, Malin Soreth addressed the room with his usual calm authority. The Aegis Ring is not merely an instrument of defense. It is a covenant of mutual restraint. It reflects the wisdom that no civilization, however capable, can be left entirely outside the disciplines that preserve all. There was again, not accusation, general principle. High above, audience screens displayed clean diagrams of route protections and emergency buffering options. Nothing on the screens looked like a cage. She reached the recessed panel that linked the civic oversight chamber to the public relay and keyed Senark's one-use override. The line accepted. A small green light appeared. 90 seconds available once engaged. At the dais, Malin moved into final language. Today we complete not a wall, but a promise. A promise that shared space will no longer depend on improvised courage alone, but on stable architecture wisely governed. Ariana stopped, listening halfway through. Stable architecture wisely governed. He had given her the contrast for free. She triggered the civic feed. The main chamber lights shifted. Murmurs moved through the lower seating arcs. One of the presiding officers frowned at a side display. Malin turned his head. Ariana stepped into the open lane. Beneath the central platform, my name is Ariana Vale, and I am an Earth strategic infrastructure engineer. I helped design the adaptive self-repair logic of the Aegis Ring. The civic relay caught her voice and threw it cleanly to the hall and the press channels before anyone could mute her. I'm speaking from a civic oversight channel because the issue before this hall is no longer ceremonial and no longer technical in the narrow sense. It is political, practical, and immediate. She kept going before procedure could catch up. A hidden control layer called Containment Horizon has been added to the ring's governance path. It allows Earth origin routes and wider human network traffic to be classified for regional isolation under broad stability language that Earth did not sign in operational form. Noise broke across the galleries. Presiding officers rose. Security moved. Ariana lifted one hand toward the live screens. Do not listen to me first. Look, the civic projectors overrode the ceremonial model and pulled up a plain route map. No beauty. No glow, just the soul lanes, the western test sectors, and the branch authorizations that connected them. Malin said very evenly. Engineer Vale is presenting an unauthorized interpretation of internal review structures. Ariana answered without looking at him. Then let the room judge whether the interpretation matches the branch itself. The screens widened. Containment Horizon. Security Harmonization Secretariat Initiation. Civic Balance Coalition Endorsement. Regional Buffering Conditions. Colony Service Weighting Adjustments. People in the hall could read enough to understand the outline. Earth. Human colonies. Reduced priority. Conditional isolation. That alone would be grave, Ariana said. But it is not the whole issue. The larger issue is this. The Aegis Ring is being treated as if it can simply be governed around Earth after Earth helped build it. That is false. Now Malin's voice cut in, still controlled, but no longer gentle. Engineer Vale is overstating a national contribution to create political panic around a common system. Ariana turned to face the room rather than him. No, I am describing a dependency the room has not been told about. She brought up the next layer. Not code. Events. A ferry breach. A relay fire. A convoy collision. A dock lock failure. Short labels. Short outcomes. Human response. System learning transfer. The adaptive self-repair layer of the Aegis Ring was trained on decades of real human crisis management across freight, rescue, dock control, and civilian emergency routing. It does not only carry Earth-written code. It carries learned response patterns from edge cases formal doctrine failed to predict in time. She saw confusion in some faces, curiosity in others. So she translated. In simple terms, the ring knows how to recover from ugly situations because it learned from humans making hard choices in ugly situations. The room quieted. If you cut Earth out of the adaptive refresh cycle, the ring does not die at once. It becomes more rigid, more procedural, more confident in the wrong moments. It begins choosing order over survival too often when reality stops behaving cleanly. At the central dais, a presiding officer ordered the civic feed suspended. The command flashed red on Ariana's side panel. Denied. Sun Art had used his 90 seconds wisely. Ariana moved to the final screen before anyone could take it. The Western test sectors. Live strain curves. Queue delays. Emergency support reroutes. Compensation loops climbing. And at the bottom, the operational note showing the partial isolation test had already begun. Ariana let the image speak for one beat. Then she said the sentence the whole story had been carrying toward. You're not debating whether Earth should be kept modest inside a shared peace. You are testing whether the galaxy can use a living system built with human adaptive logic while treating humanity itself as a controlled risk. It cannot. Malin stepped down from the dais at last. Security hesitated around him. He spoke with more force now. What the room is seeing is a temporary observation cycle designed to reassure this council that no one member's volatility can endanger the many. Ariana met his eyes. And what the room is seeing in the strain curves is what happens the moment you ask the ring to protect the many by pretending the people who taught it how to survive are now the danger. Malin recovered first, which Ariana had expected. People who built careers on managing disorder did not freeze for long. He stepped into the central light and raised one hand toward the screens. Delegates, what Engineer Vale calls dependency, is simply one contributor block's maintenance preference within a broader multilateral architecture. Many civilizations taught the ring many lessons. To imply that common safety cannot exist without privileged Earth access is not a technical warning. It is a political claim. Ariana answered before it could settle. If this were about privileged access, I would be arguing ownership. I am not. I am arguing traceable operational consequence. She shifted the screens again, narrowing the field. Here are 3 sectors under your live observation cycle. Here are the response delays after fresh human updates were throttled, the compensatory load curves, the reroute that moved medical priority to a secondary lane because static doctrine preferred cleaner congestion patterns, and the local patch behavior becoming more orderly and less correct. She paused just long enough for translators to catch up. Orderly and less correct, she repeated. Malin pointed toward the event examples. You present selected historical incidents from one civilization and call them universal wisdom. That is not neutral architecture. That is cultural capture. Ariana shook her head. No, cultural capture would be hiding the source while using the benefit. I am naming the source because this room was asked to believe the ring could be politically severed from humanity without operational loss. She opened the inheritance summary in the simplest format she had built all morning. Not raw chains, just category counts. Human field rescue patterns. Human civilian panic corrections. Human irregular dock recovery practice. Human freight triage under incomplete data. Human convoy adaptation under failed command assumptions. Thousands upon thousands of transfers. The ring was not trained on human heroism. It was trained on human mess, on the way real crews, dispatchers, colony medics, and maintenance teams made systems work when clean theory failed. She let that settle. That is why it performs so well under irregular pressure. If you isolate Earth and wider human network inputs from the learning loop, you are not making the ring impartial. You are making it forget how reality behaves when reality stops being polite. A delegate from the Upper Terran Periphery block stood without recognition. Are the colony waiting adjustments real? Ariana answered immediately. Yes. Malin spoke at the same time. Those tables are draft resilience scenarios, not enacted policy. Ariana did not let the overlap confuse the room. They are attached to the same branch as the regional isolation controls. Under managed instability, peripheral human settlements lose service priority without public notice obligations. That is not a hypothetical concern. It is a prepared outcome. Now the room moved in a new way. Questions began, not from Earth first, from smaller corridor states, from insurance, delegates, from transport unions, from a Varan civic bloc representing mixed-species station residents. The exact people Malin had hoped to soothe with the idea of stable architecture were suddenly hearing that stability might mean quietly deciding whose slower medicine or delayed tow rights counted as an acceptable price. Ariana did not waste the opening. If this trigger is ever used, who is informed and when? If the ring's learning loop is cut from fresh human input, what formal review measured degraded edge case performance? Who approved live observation on civilian sectors before this hall concluded its governance debate? Every question forced the issue out of philosophy and into accountability. Malin changed tactics again. Even if every strain curve you present is accepted at face value, they do not prove malice. They prove a transition challenge. Shared systems always require painful periods of standardization. Ariana stepped toward the central lane, close enough now that the room could see she was no longer speaking as a contributor guarding a contract. She was speaking as a representative of the civilization being politely reduced. "Do you hear yourself?" she asked. Malin's expression did not change. She went on. "You build a branch that allows Earth and wider human routes to be classified for isolation. You attached hidden service downgrades for human colonies. You initiated a live, civilian observation cycle before public governance concluded. And when the ring began to strain, your answer is not that the branch was wrong. Your answer is that being standardized hurts." Ariana pointed to the test sector readout. "This is not a painful transition toward fairness. This is a governing class trying to prove it can keep the benefit of human contribution while reducing human agency." Malin stepped closer too, enough that the cameras caught both of them in the same frame. Humanity is not being reduced. Humanity is being integrated carefully into a civilization-scale security system that cannot be held hostage by any one member's habits, however effective those habits once were. Ariana answered softly, which made people listen harder. "You are still trying to make this about habits." She brought up the final comparative projection, the one Rian had nearly been detained helping her build. Projected degradation over 6 months under full Earth learning loop separation. Not collapse. Worse than collapse. Quiet erosion. Medical delay accumulations. Insurance risk inflation. Slower recovery after irregular strikes. Higher loss during mixed civilian freight. Incidents. A civilization-wide tax on uncertainty paid mostly at the edges. The ring does not fall apart in 6 days or 6 weeks. That is why this branch is so dangerous. It becomes less alive slowly, more elegant, more governable, and then one day a colony hull breach happens in bad weather or a convoy stack folds in a debris storm, and the ring chooses procedure over survival because the people who taught it how messy survival really is were classified as a problem. No one interrupted her. Ariana took one more step. "This is my warning, and it is also Earth's warning. Earth is not asking to own the common border. Earth is refusing to help you lie about what keeps it alive." She turned, not to Malin now, but to the whole chamber. "You can still govern this system with us. You cannot safely govern it around us." Then she gave them a line that would survive every clipped feed and summary stream. "Earth is not a guest trapped behind this wall. Earth is part of what makes the wall hold." The silence after that did not feel like victory. It felt like the moment a large machine realized it had been watched from the wrong angle. And then the Western test sectors began to fail in public. The first visible sign was small enough that only Ariana noticed it at once. A Q indicator in the Western shoulder sectors shifted from amber to red, then try to stabilize by rerouting traffic through two auxiliary relays already under compensation load. The second sign arrived 22 seconds later. A civilian med carrier on a secondary lane lost preferred dock access because the Ring's static doctrine judged the alternative pattern cleaner for corridor discipline. The hall screens updated automatically. A ripple ran across the delegates. The meaning was simple even for non-engineers in the room. A ship carrying medical cargo had just been pushed toward a cleaner schedule instead of the safer option. The third sign made denial impossible. One of the outer patch stations in the observation cycle misread a congestion bloom as an orderly compliance slowdown and delayed emergency support drones by 41 seconds. That would not sound catastrophic to someone living inside a council chamber. To anyone who had worked real routes, it sounded like the beginning of a body count. Ariana saw it before the official. Staff did. Freeze the observation cycle. The presiding officer ignored her and barked for a technical review. Too late. A fourth red line appeared. This time the station audio carried a clipped field notice from a Western logistics controller. Mixed traffic compression. Medical lane instability. Requesting adaptive override. The reply came a beat later. Request denied. Pending governance review. The sound of it in the hall was almost unbearable because it was so normal. That was what terror in systems often sounded like. Clean refusal delivered on schedule while living people move through the consequences. Ariana turned back to the chamber. Voice hard now. This is what I told you. The Ring is already becoming orderly and less correct. Malin started issuing instructions to Secretariat staff. He was not a fool. He could see the optics collapsing. But every second he spent managing optics was a second the room spent understanding how much had been hidden under the language of prudence. Ariana reached the civic relay again and forced the Western sector audio live. A tired human controller's voice filled the chamber. We need dirty reroute authority now. Repeat now. Static path is choking Dock 12, and we have cold chain cargo on the med carrier. We need adaptive exception. That was followed by another voice, not human. Local node requests denied by observation state. Awaiting committee unlock. The chamber reacted at last. Not with panic, with something worse for the coalition. Disgust. The delegates from station-resident blocks stood first, then smaller trade worlds, then insurance and freight observers who understood exactly what a committee unlock meant when the people asking for it were looking at live degradation. Malin tried to regain the center. The observation cycle is being suspended. This incident, while regrettable, does not invalidate the broader governance principle. Ariana cut across him. It invalidates the belief that you can test a living border by taking the living part out of it. He turned on her then, true anger finally showing through the patience. And what is your proposal? Permanent Earth veto over common security. No. The answer came from Ariana like steel settling into place. My proposal is honesty. She pointed toward the Western sector audio. You want common security. Fine. Then build common security honestly. Say that the Ring depends in part on human adaptive practice. Say that cutting Earth out of the learning loop carries real operational risk. Say that the colonies you were ready to downgrade are inhabited by people, not balancing variables. Say that the coalition wanted control over pace, over unpredictability, over a civilization that changes systems too fast for older powers to feel comfortable. Say all of it plainly. Then ask the room what kind of border it wants. The hall had crossed some line now. Not fully to her side. Not into unity. But into a place where euphemism had become too expensive to carry. A delegate from the Varan Civic Bloc spoke without waiting for recognition. Was this branch disclosed to mixed resident jurisdictions whose freight depends on Western shoulder corridors? No, Ariana said. Malin said, disclosure was pending final governance alignment. A transport insurer from the High Gallery rose next. Did the Secretariat approve live civilian observation without independent casualty threshold review? No one answered immediately. That was answer enough. The questions multiplied. Who signed the colony waiting tables? Who authorized the observation cycle? Why the branch used language broader than emergency defense? Whether Earth had been intentionally kept outside final operational signature. Whether other contributor blocks had hidden restrictions too. Whether the ring's public safety claims remained valid under current governance design. Ariana stepped back half a pace and let the room do what rooms sometimes did when truth arrived with timing they could not control. It stopped being about one voice. Malin saw that too. His shoulders lowered, not in surrender, but in the precise recalibration of a man choosing which losses to accept to keep larger losses at bay. When he spoke again, the tone had changed. The implementation vote will be suspended pending full review of governance branch disclosures and operational dependency assessments. Not canceled, suspended. Still, it mattered. The presiding officers moved quickly to formalize the pause, trying to retake procedure before outrage turned into collapse. Security deactivated the observation cycle at last. Western sector strain began easing almost immediately once local adaptive exceptions were restored. Ariana watched the red lines soften back toward amber and felt no relief, only a dull anger at how close the room had come to calling this maturity. Malin looked at her across the chamber. No fury, no theatrics, only a long, level gaze carrying the first unmistakable sign of respect he had not wanted to give. He knew she had not won cleanly. She knew he had not lost fully. That made the outcome real. The room would still be dangerous tomorrow. The coalition would still exist. The urge to manage Earth rather than meet it would not disappear because one public exposure had gone badly for them. But the border had not closed, and the galaxy had just watched why. The public clash was over, but the station had not settled. By the time Ariana left the concourse hall, Helion Spindle was already moving into the colder work of aftermath. The formal aftermath began immediately, and it took 6 hours, 3 provisional resolutions, 1 emergency oversight charter, and more quiet panic than any official summary would ever admit. The implementation vote on the Aegis Ring governance model was suspended indefinitely pending independent review. The Security Harmonization Secretariat was ordered to disclose hidden branch logic tied to regional buffering states. The colony service waiting tables were frozen, and a temporary mixed species technical board with protected Earth representation was appointed to examine the ring's learning dependencies and governance risks. None of that was a clean triumph. Malin Soreth was not removed from office. The Civic Balance Coalition did not collapse. No one marched out in shame admitting that humanity had been right all along. Systems almost never rewarded truth that neatly. What changed was deeper and harder to reverse. The story changed. Earth was no longer the younger civilization lucky to be sheltered inside a wise common order. Not after today. Not after the chamber heard a living border start choosing procedure over survival the moment humanity was treated as a problem instead of a foundation. Not after resident blocks, insurers, and freight world saw how easily a language of prudence could become a method of quiet triage imposed on someone else's people. In the hours that followed, Earth representation hardened, not into swagger, into clarity. Ariana spent much of that time in closed briefings, technical review cells, and 1 emergency session with the Mixed Species Oversight Board. Riental testified remotely under protest, his movement safeguards still active. Sun Arct moved through the institutional wreckage with the strained focus of a man forced to stop managing optics and start protecting facts. For the first time all day, he and Ariana stood on the same side of the same argument without pretending otherwise. That did not make them friends. It made them useful. By the time the first emergency review cycle ended, the broad outline was undeniable. The branch had been real. The colony waiting tables had been real. The live observation cycle had been approved before governance review closed. The ring's adaptive performance had degraded exactly where human refreshes had been throttled. The room could still lie about motives. It could no longer lie about structure. Earth was no longer asking whether the Council had tried to build a polite border around human expansion. Earth was demanding to know who else had known, who had signed, and how many lives would have entered the risk ledger if Ariana had kept smiling through the ceremony. That was the other thing that changed after public truth. The people at the edges started speaking. Colony dispatch unions sent sworn route records. Mixed dock authorities submitted anomaly logs. Insurance monitors released quietly held concern memos about unexplained Western shoulder assumptions. Freight cooperatives from worlds far outside Seoul sent statements that were less diplomatic but more useful. They said what systems usually tried not to say aloud. If the border learns from human crisis behavior, then cutting humanity out is not neutrality. It is sabotage by administration. The phrase spread faster than the coalition could contain it. Not sabotage by malice. Sabotage by administration. That was worse for them. Malice could be isolated. Administration implicated everyone who had chosen comfort in the language of procedure. Before Ariana departed, Malin requested one final private conversation. She almost refused, but in the end she accepted because there was still one more truth to measure between them. They met again near the outer observation glass, where Meriden filled half the dark like a slow-turning storm. This time no one pretended the room was neutral. Malin Soreth had come without attendants, without cameras, and without the kind face he wore for rooms that needed calming. He looked tired now. Honest, perhaps, in the exhausted way honesty sometimes arrived only after performance lost its purpose. I wanted to see whether you would still be here. I considered leaving. I'm glad you did not. He joined her at the glass, keeping a respectful distance. For a while they looked down at Meriden without speaking. At last he said, "You were right about one thing. Only one." A shadow of dry humor touched his face. Enough to matter. We attempted to preserve control over pace by undernaming the cost. That was a grave mistake. Ariana folded her arms. And the rest is more difficult. I still believe ungoverned acceleration tears systems apart. So build systems that can survive being changed. He looked at her. That is easy to say when change favors your civilization's strengths. Ariana held his gaze. You think change favors us. That is because you see the part where humans improvise and adapt. You do not see the cost clearly enough. We are good at ugly survival because we have paid for it often. Too often. I do see some of the cost. Perhaps not enough. No, not enough. He looked back at the storm below. Still, today will make Earth harder to dismiss and harder to absorb. It will also make Earth harder to trust. Ariana did not look away. You mean harder to control while still using what we build? His silence conceded the point. Then he said, with reluctant plainness, yes. She pushed off the glass. Then perhaps the next architecture should begin from a different assumption. And what assumption is that? That humanity is not a temporary volatility to be buffered until the adults settle the room. When he answered, his voice carried no irony. That will be a harder future. Ariana picked up her satchel. Harder than the one you just tried to build. She left him there by the glass. Not defeated and not redeemed. Just standing where he could finally see the size of the thing he had nearly tried to reduce. A little later, when Ariana reached the departure transfer, messages from Earth were already flooding in. Ministry questions, support notes, legal advisories, and blunt thanks from colony unions and freight crews from worlds she had never visited. The shuttle tube to the residential wing opened with a soft hiss. Ariana stepped inside and took the empty seat nearest the rear window. Out beyond the station, the first sections of the Aegis Ring glimmered across the trade dark like a promise, still deciding what it meant. A common border whose fate would depend on whether the galaxy learned to work with humanity without first trying to remove the human part from what humanity made. She was tired, but beneath the exhaustion, something steadier remained. The room had been forced to stop, look again, and admit that the story it preferred was incomplete. Because out in the colonies, on freight lanes, in rescue docks, and across all the rough edges where systems met weather and fear and imperfect people, life would go on demanding the same thing it always demanded. And after today, whatever the Galaxy Council chose next, it would have to make that choice knowing one fact it could no longer hide behind ceremony. Earth was not standing politely inside the wall. Earth was part of the reason the wall still stood. If this story meant something to you, please like, share, and subscribe. Every bit of support helps this channel keep going and helps more people discover stories about humanity, courage, and the moments when the galaxy is forced to look again. Thank you so much for listening, and I would love to have you with me again in the next story.